I smiled when the question came, not because it was funny, because I already knew where it was going. My husband Daniel and I were standing in the backyard of a large suburban home on a warm Saturday evening. One of his old business associates was hosting a cookout. People moved between patio tables carrying drinks and paper plates. The conversations were easy, familiar, predictable. I had attended enough gatherings like this to recognize the pattern. The men discussed careers. The women were asked about hobbies, grandchildren, recipes, or travel. None of that bothered me by itself. What wore on me was the certainty with which strangers decided who I must be. Daniel had retired from a successful corporate career. Most people assumed I had spent my life following him from place to place, organizing dinners and supporting his ambitions. The truth was more complicated and usually not worth explaining. I was reaching for a glass of iced tea when one of Daniel's friends turned toward me. "So," he asked casually, "can you cook?" A few people looked over. I shrugged. "A little." That answer should have ended it. Instead, another man laughed. "Come on, that's not a real answer." His wife joined in. "She's being modest." The first man raised his drink. After putting up with Daniel all these years, she must be an expert. A few people chuckled, then came the comment that shifted the mood. "Well, someone said, if you've spent your life being a military wife or a corporate wife, cooking kind of comes with the territory." The group laughed again. Not cruelly, not viciously, just confidently, as if the conclusion was obvious. I felt the familiar temptation to correct them. Then I felt the equally familiar exhaustion that followed every correction, so instead I smiled. "Only if it's easier than landing a Blackhawk in a sandstorm." The words came out lightly, almost playful. Most of them laughed. One man nearly dropped his drink. The reaction was so sudden that everyone noticed. He froze halfway through a sip and stared at me. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The man was older than the rest of us, silver-haired and straight-backed despite his age. I knew who he was, retired lieutenant general. Army Aviation, 3 stars. We had met years earlier during a briefing overseas. I doubted he remembered, yet something in his expression told me he was searching through old memories. "You said Blackhawk," he finally replied. "In a sandstorm." I nodded. The backyard grew unexpectedly quiet. The others looked between us without understanding why. The general set his glass down slowly. "What unit?" I hesitated, not because I couldn't answer, because I knew exactly what would happen if I did. For most of my retirement, I had enjoyed anonymity. No introductions, no explanations, no expectations. Just another person standing in line at grocery stores, another neighbor walking a dog, another wife at social gatherings. It was peaceful, but peace sometimes comes with invisibility. I looked at him. He was waiting, and suddenly I was tired of pretending. I said quietly. His eyes widened. A few people exchanged confused glances. The general nodded once, not surprised anymore, certain. "I knew I recognized you." The conversation around us had completely stopped. One of Daniel's friends frowned. "Recognized her from where?" The general looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Then he looked at me as though asking permission. I gave a small nod. He turned back toward the group. "You mean nobody told you?" Nobody answered. The general almost laughed, not mockingly, just in disbelief. "This woman commanded aviation operations in environments most people wouldn't volunteer to visit for 10 minutes. The backyard became silent. A chair scraped somewhere behind me. The general continued. "I sat through briefings where people listened when she spoke because lives depended on it." One of the men who had been joking earlier blinked. "Wait," he looked at me. "Seriously?" I nodded. The silence became uncomfortable, not for me. For them, because they were all replaying the last 20 minutes, every assumption, every joke, every confident conclusion. The general rescued them from the moment. He started asking about old colleagues, deployments, aircraft. Most of the conversation was meaningless to everyone else, but the details were enough. Nobody doubted him, or me. After a few minutes, Daniel quietly appeared beside me. I could feel his embarrassment, not because he had mocked me. He hadn't, because he had allowed the assumptions to stand. For years, at dinners, parties, fundraisers, neighborhood events, he squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry." The words were barely audible. I looked at him. "For what?" He took a moment to answer. "For letting people think they knew who you were." I understood what he meant, and I appreciated it, but I shook my head. "That's not entirely your responsibility." The truth was harder than that. I had participated in my own disappearance. Keeping things simple was easier than explaining, easier than answering questions, easier than becoming a story people wanted to hear. The cost was that eventually people stopped seeing me at all. As the evening continued, the atmosphere changed, not dramatically. Nobody apologized publicly, nobody delivered speeches. Nobody was humiliated, but something had shifted. The jokes disappeared, the interruptions stopped. People listened more carefully. A few asked thoughtful questions, others seemed almost embarrassed. One woman approached me near the end of the night. "I feel like I owe you an apology," I smiled. "You don't." I made assumptions. "We all do," she nodded slowly. "I guess that's true." When Daniel and I finally walked toward our car, the sky had already darkened. The sounds of the party faded behind us. For a while, neither of us spoke, then Daniel looked over. "Do you ever wish people knew?" I considered the question. For most of my life, recognition had been tied to responsibility. Rank brought expectations. Authority brought scrutiny. Retirement had freed me from both, but there was a difference between privacy and erasure. "I don't need people to know everything," I said. "But sometimes it's nice when they realize they don't know everything." Daniel smiled. So did I, not because I had won anything, not because anyone had been put in their place. The evening hadn't changed my past, or theirs. It had simply reminded everyone of something easy to forget. The most impressive things about people are often the things they never mention. And sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who has nothing left to prove.